very warm welcome, Paul. Paul, you have quite a career. I understood that you have a degree in physics from Manchester and that you live in Santa Clara now.
That's right, yes.
And you worked in great companies like, what was it, eBay and VMware and so on. And now for the last 3.5 years, you are in the office of the CTO, you're technical director in the office of the CTO of Google Cloud. And we've invited you to have a candid, let's say, a candid conversation on, yep. On data transformation. And I think we found a very interesting title. I mean, data transformation. Haven't we been talking too long about this already? And the question is, aren't we there yet? That's your question for today, Paul.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much, Hendrik. Absolute delight to be here. It was really interesting, and I learned a lot by listening to all of the other panelists as well. All of you on your journeys that are unique. I think the interesting thing about digital transformation for me, when I think about it, it's one of these things there's been these phases in computing. Quite often when I give a presentation, I actually show a photograph of my wife's aunt. And I say, is that a computer? And actually human beings started out as computers. And it turns out that on her wedding certificate in 1956, it lists her occupation as computer. And she actually married an engineer. They worked at GCHQ in the UK doing cryptography. And it's the first instance I know of an engineer marrying their computer, kind of like Ex Machina, but there was less blood in the end, for those of you who are familiar with the movie. But really, all joking aside, I mean, this is a journey we've been on for 80 years. The digital era, we went from humans doing computing to analog. Digital started between 1939 and 1941, depending on your nationality and amount of pride and how much you want to argue about things. So we're 80 years in, and the question for everyone is, we only started talking about the transformation aspect, I guess, the best part of 10 years ago. But I think what's fundamentally different around transformation now is digital has been used for most of those 80 years to make things faster, cheaper, and more reliable. Yeah. It was about removing toil, removing errors, speeding things up. What I think we see with digital transformation now is that it's really about doing things differently. It's offering new opportunities to deliver new kinds of value, new kinds of services, to deliver them in new ways. I think, listening to the previous panel, it allows collaboration in fundamentally different ways. So with digital, it's really about organizations thinking differently. I think it's about clarity of mission and purpose, yep. Which I saw was highlighted again, I think by Anka, was it, in the first panel? Very much, clarity of mission and purpose, who you're going to be in this digital era, and then prioritizing and making that happen. But it's also a recognition, I think, that every organization, every enterprise is actually becoming a technology enterprise by definition. Yep. That it is your success in your mission will be defined by your use of digital and technology, and your failure will be because you haven't taken advantage of it appropriately.
What do you see as the big trends nowadays? Now that we're in 2020, what is really driving transformation nowadays?
I think there's a set of things. I mean, there's some deep technology trends that are going on around apps and platforms, but I think they manifest themselves more at the CIO level with a set of things that have been observable for a while. There's great connectivity, so mobile, something like 2.3 billion smartphones at this point in time are connecting everyone together. And so the interaction model, that when you combined with social, creates a completely different engagement model for every organization with the world around them. You combine that with IoT, we expect something like 20 billion IoT devices this year. My personal sense is that an underestimate. In my home, I have something like 65 IP addresses in my home of devices. And actually I have a device on my arm. I happen to be diabetic. And so I monitor my blood glucose on my phone, and I can monitor the blood glucose of my 10-year-old daughter as well. So all of these devices and connections are generating a torrent of data. We're talking, was it 2.3 times 10 to the power of 18. That's 18 zeros of data, bytes of data every day. There's more data generated every year than all years in human history combined before that. And so the challenge for everyone, as we think about this, is how to take that data. We've heard a number of panelists talk about it. It's how you take that data, you turn it into information, you turn it into insights that allow you to make decisions and then drive outcomes based on that data. That data is your situational awareness. And so for everyone, I think those are the big trends in terms of what we see happening around data. And underpinning all of that, as you'd probably expect me to say, I think is cloud. Mm-hmm. Cloud is, even though I'm a technologist, I tend to think of cloud more as it's a consumption model that has changed everyone's expectations of what technology and IT can be. In the past, you would either look after everything yourself, or you'd outsource it all to someone else, and you'd sign some long-term upfront contract. But cloud allows you to acquire the IT that doesn't differentiate you as a commodity, whether that's software as a service, whether it's physical infrastructure. I mean, how many companies are genuinely differentiated by owning and managing servers or personal productivity software or whatever? So cloud allows you to acquire all the non-differentiating software as commodities and to really focus on what does offer differentiated value for you as an organization. And I think, and coming back to those other trends, that I would argue they wouldn't exist without cloud. Cloud allows you to capture all of that data. It allows you to connect all of these machines together, these smartphones, these IoT devices. And without the scale of cloud, we wouldn't have been able to do the things like machine learning and AI. They require vast computational capacity to actually be able to do these things, at least as we start. I mean, now, I've got my, my phone here. They have, AI acceleration chips in these things now, and you can actually do a lot of the AI at the edge.
Yeah.
But as we started all of this had to be centralized, and cloud for me is the place that has really been the catalyst for all of that.
And have you seen a big increased uptake of cloud and then AI, because that's one of the domains that Google Cloud is very good in now because of the crisis that we're going through? Has COVID been an accelerator for your business?
I think, my sense is, so there's a couple of things. I think cloud is going well. I think in general, as we look at organizations and the companies I work with, so I'm very lucky, both in my career, in my past, I've been on advisory boards of large corporations. I've been a consultant for the EU in the grid days, and then early on in the cloud, as well as all my day job here. And cloud is offering this great opportunity for these organizations, for everyone, all of you, to figure out, to really focus on what does truly differentiate. I think over the years, it's like all things operationally, it requires people to gain trust in it. It's not necessarily what cloud is, it's what it's perceived as being. And so trust has been slowly earned. And I think now we're seeing that, everywhere I heard during the panels, that cloud is being adopted. And I think that is what I expect to happen. I think COVID is an accelerant for many, many things. And I am seeing a large number of organizations who are actually, they are using the pause in business, if you will, to actually accelerate certain technology strategies and initiatives. Because even though there's stress on the business from a financial perspective, perhaps, there is less stress on some of the technology systems, depending on the sector that you happen to be in. So for example, in travel and airlines, this is actually, as long as they have the finances to be able to get through a period where there is much less stress on their technology, and they can actually drive ahead initiatives and transformation much, much faster than they would be able to normally.
Because most organizations, they need to reinvent themselves every so many years and every faster. And so innovation is core to the survival and the success of organizations today. How do you look at that?
So innovation absolutely is. When I think about cloud, it allows three things and that take you to innovation. The first is you can divest. So divesting is getting out of the business of technology that doesn't support your differentiation or your mission if you happen to be in the military or whatever. Make it someone else's problem, make it go away. You don't want to have to care about it. That allows you to invest. What you can invest in is in supporting that differentiation and that value. That's typically around intimacy. You gain that intimacy digitally, right? You have all that data that allows you to understand your stakeholders, your customers, your employees, the world around you, and to build differentiated value. And then you can innovate. Innovation for me is an imperative that's at the heart of digital transformation. It's really, technology is allowing organizations and actually allowing individuals to challenge the assumptions that business models are predicated on, right? So if you think of, so there's a classic one that I always think of because I'm an English speaker. So Encyclopedia Britannica in 1990 had a $600 million a year revenue stream, okay? And presumably most people know what Britannica is. If you're in the German-speaking world, it's Duden. I can't comment on the French and other speaking worlds because I just don't know enough, forgive me. But encyclopedias were built by having experts create articles and experts review them, and they were a trusted source of data. By 1995, Encarta, which was on a CD, had basically halved Britannica's revenue stream because they were just a more convenient channel. But they use the same business model. Now, today we have Wikipedia, right? And that has billions of users. And it's not just you readers, these are contributors in real time. So the business model has been disrupted by technology. You don't need experts to write articles as a panel and paid for, and you don't need experts to review them. And so what you actually have is something that now has broad reach of billions of people. It's more or less free. Academically, it's shown to be more accurate than Encyclopedia Britannica, and you don't have to wait a year for the beautiful supplement. You see the same thing happening in transport with taxis, right? We went from taxis that are well regulated and people needed to be trained to, well, my smartphone can give me all the information, so we have ride sharing, and then we'll have self-driving cars. Yeah, what's happened with tech, particularly with cloud, is there's zero friction now to the consumption and use of technology. So it means the small and nimble with nothing to lose, which could be a startup and a few people, have access to the same tech as the largest companies on the planet in general. And they can pay for it with a credit card, and they can use that to undermine the business models of old established businesses. And so everyone has to innovate. That really is the imperative.
What does that mean for, let's say, our CIOs, our digital leaders, for large organizations, and how do you see their role? Because they're being challenged all the time now.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting problem, because one of the things, when we talk about digital transformation, there's this tendency to just wax lyrically about technology all the time. This is all about people and culture. I think there's a set of things here. If I think about, as leaders, how we create an environment that allows our organizations to move forward in their mission and their purpose, there's a set of things that you need. From a directional perspective, to do the right things, invest, divest, innovate, and everything else, you need to be clear about your future value of your organization to your stakeholders. That's your customers, your shareholders, your employees, the communities or countries you serve, whatever it is. And then you can position things. To innovate, you need to really, you have to create a number of things. You have to create a culture, in my experience, I mean, at Google, we're a unique place. It's why I joined Google. Not everyone can be Google, but you can learn from Google. We've been lucky enough to learn a lot by making many mistakes, actually, as it happens. So, and actually a tolerance for mistakes and getting things wrong is key to being successful with innovation. Because as I always say, you typically, failure is the currency with which you acquire knowledge. So the good news with cloud is you can fail fast, relatively cheaply, and with little risk. And actually that's true in the digital domain overall. But ultimately, it's about a culture that welcomes ideas and welcomes challenging the status quo. You need to allow people, and this is particularly harder, I found in some of the European companies I've worked in, where there is a lot of respect for one's predecessors and senior people who've built their careers on ideas and certain things. And sometimes those need to be reimagined or refactored. So you need to create a culture where it's welcomed. You need to create sets of processes that allow you to capture that innovation. Sometimes that happens inside your organization. Sometimes it happens outside. So part of being able to do this, and I heard it again actually in, I think it was Martin Bellamy commented earlier about a data workbench. It's about building platforms and ecosystems, both inside your own company, that allow people to innovate on top of your existing IP and assets that you have. Certainly you need to do it inside because it makes innovation quicker. If you share all of that value and give access to most of your employees, they can actually have an opportunity to deliver new value on top of it. And if you expose it externally, and you have a way of monetizing it, you can build these platforms and you can build an ecosystem that innovates on top of you that you can monetize. And sometimes that's a strategy for organizations to spin out, create ecosystems, and sometimes buy in from that ecosystem that they've created.
Okay. So if you look at the state of digital transformation today,
Yeah.
what's next? I mean, it's also our payoff of CIONEXT. So
Yeah.
what's next for our people, for our members?
Yeah, I think it's interesting for digital transformation. I think, you know, the first 6-7 years in my experience were driven by disruption, just the nature of technology opening up an opportunity for new challengers to come into marketplaces and disrupt business models. I think, you know, what we've got out of that transformation exercise, most people, by the way, no one is really there in terms of digital transformation. I think it's a journey that's never ending in some ways. It's life. You don't want to get to the end of it because it's a bad thing. But you have to recognize where the next way station is and plan for it. And so every organization is on its own journey from its own starting place to its own destination, and they need clarity about where they're going. I think what we see happening in terms of the digital aspects, it's really about building agility at the end of the day. We talked about agile, I know in a previous panel, and there was a question around agile versus agility. Organizational agility is what allows you to survive in times of change. And we're in a time of great change. That change before was driven by tech. It's now being driven by a couple of things, geopolitics. The Vice Admiral was good enough to talk about Gaia X. And I think that's a representation of a kind of digital fragmentation. So the imposition of geopolitical boundaries, not even at the nation state. I mean, in America, we have it within California, has its own set of regulations regarding privacy that are stronger than the rest of the US's. And so we're seeing an imposition of geopolitical boundaries on the digital domain. And with COVID, we've seen obviously an accelerant in a number of areas, including that fragmentation. Unfortunately, I'd hoped it would actually drive coming together. But this is all, you know, the next part of the journey. I think the tech will continue. Some aspects will be accelerated. There will be change coming. You know, I talked about computing going from human to analog to digital. The next step is quantum. That's just beginning. We expect that to get more interesting by about 2030. And so there'll be more opportunities for, you know, doing data and things at extreme scale. But a lot of this journey for me actually is a human journey for all of us, right? It's about your people, your human capital, about your company and enterprise, how you see yourself in the mirror in 5 years' time, and then how you use technology to drive and support that.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. I hope you enjoyed this this conference. And
very much. I always learn. I always enjoy listening, and I think all of us are on this learning journey. And I look forward to working with this community more going forward.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Paul.